Hello and welcome to this episode of Mind the Gap, Making Education Work Across the Globe with me, Tom Sherrington, and Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Tom. I'm terribly excited.
Yes, so am I. Because we're really global in this episode, and we're really thrilled that we are welcoming Efrat Furst, who's dialing in from Jerusalem. Hello, Efrat. How are you?
Hi. Hello. Nice to be here, and I'm fine. Excited too.
That's great. I mean, we're excited because we love talking about teaching and the cognitive science aspect of it. Emma is the proud author of this extended Mind in Action that she wrote with David and Oliver, her co-writers earlier this year. So that you're a cognitive scientist, Emma, aren't you? Fantastic.
So I must say, you know how everybody sort of has like a gateway band or an entrance to something. Efrat is the very first bit of reading I did around cognitive science. So she was my first dalliance with the field, and
that's amazing. Okay,
and I still have got some of my very early slides with your models and work on there. So weirdly, I feel like I know you, but I've never actually met you.
We've never met.
And we're also thrilled that you provided one of the walkthroughs for our Volume 3 walkthroughs. And actually, I'll tell you now that it's become one I refer to in every single talk that I do, including one earlier, because I will talk about why in a minute. But it's true. It gives this sort of reasoning for a bit of the kind of learning process, which I just think is so brilliant. And I just find that once people hear it, they go, "Oh yeah, God, that makes so much sense." But let's just get a bit of background from you. So I know that looking at your website and everything, I only really picked this up recently, that you've moved fairly recently to the Mofet Institute, and it says on here that it's a centre for research, curriculum and programme development in teacher education. So that just sounds absolutely awesome. So tell us a bit about that. What's your work involved there?
So yes, it's the only institute in Israel that does that, because we're small and it's the National Institute. And we do everything that is related to teachers' education, and mostly working with the teacher colleges. In my role, I combine a few things. It's both research. I'm not doing research, but I'm coordinating research or communicating research, or being the bridge, the place that I enjoy, or the role that I enjoy doing for the last 13 years maybe. And I also do digital pedagogy. So I'm a lot of digital and technology, but my role is I'm the pedagogue. Everybody's coming with the questions about how to do it right. And I really enjoyed it. And I think that it's mostly a teacher's education, that is higher education. But it's a higher education for teachers, so it's always, multi-level thinking, and it's great. It's very active. We're doing a lot of different things and many programs. I don't do everything, but I'm involved in a few very excited programs there. So, yeah, and I'm hoping to bring in more.
Is it a place where, is it one of the places you have to go to attend to become a teacher in Israel? Is it sort of?
So not exactly. We have those colleges and schools, either in the universities or dedicated colleges for teachers. And we are kind of an organizations that works with them and provide professional education for the educators, like teacher trainers, or lecturers for teachers, and teachers themselves. It depends on the program, but it's not that teachers are not learning in our institute, but we are providing services to those institutes, if it makes any sense.
That sounds so interesting. And how's it different from your previous place, the Teaching and Learning Centre, which was in the University of Jerusalem? So is that similar?
It's similar, but it's also different. So there, it's a university, so it's working with the lecturers on their teaching and designing courses and redesigning courses mainly, but working with the entire population of lecturers. So now it's more mostly lecturers who work with future teachers. So it's different. Now it's more focused on actual teaching, and I'm excited about it.
So, Efrat, you're working with teachers, teacher educators, quite a broad bandwidth of professionals within your current role. What I'm really interested in is, what are you really excited about in terms of what's kind of what's keeping you awake at night, but in a good way, because you think this is really exciting. I really want to get into this and think about it in a bit more depth. What's kind of the burning thing that you're thinking about at the moment?
So one thing, it's something that you know better maybe, it's bringing the science of learning to these people, because they don't know it, and most of them, some of them do, many people don't. It's not part of the conversation on a daily basis. And I've talked to some people and they're excited about it, and I'm hoping to bring it more into the picture, and it's definitely one of the things that I'm excited about. It's not currently going on, but it will be. I'm hoping to have more of it. I do teach. I have students and I teach them those subjects, but that's not a huge part of what I do. Other than that, I like work. Another part of the work that I really like is constructing or redesigning courses. And this is when we take everything apart and build it anew. And then this is when I actually use those diagrams that I work with, that you mentioned before. And I always tell them I actually can see it, and I say, okay, this is missing, and we have to make more of this, and this is the reason that things are not working, and this is how. So I'm really excited about doing it without actually saying what are the principles, but I really enjoy this process. It's really challenging every time. So it's really great. Actually, now we are working on a special project in which we take courses that were taught within the institute, and now they're moving into the schools. So we're redesigning them, and it's really, really exciting. So this is another thing.
I was reading one of your blogs actually about how you took some of your earlier work or work from a different field into that course design to create that table, which was it Sam Sims and Harry Fletcher Wood and Sarah Cottingham's paper that you kind of integrated with your. I was reading that earlier and thinking that was absolutely fascinating. Like you said, that bridge between adult education and the cognitive sciences. I found it completely fascinating.
I think I really like this work, and I actually brought it in already, and it was accepted really nicely. I think it's game changing in many ways, and the realization that we have to think about those stages and then bringing the science behind them, even though it's not necessarily the science it's not from education, but it's from other fields. And then building this framework that has the stages and saying, we have those 4 stages. We propose that it's essential to go through each and every one of them, which makes a lot of sense. And also, you maybe see the links to my thinking, and then providing enough space for people to work with. And I actually read it, and I know, and I heard Harry and Sam talking about it, that it's for teachers' education, but it's more general, of course. So, of course, in terms of where the science comes from, and of course, it's teachers' education, but it's more general. The ideas are more general. And I think that I try to write it down, but I think that it's something that tells us that the entire field has matured in a way that it's going to be more practical now, but not just practical that we know about retrieval practice, so we are applying it in the classroom, but in a more general way. So this is something I'm definitely very excited about, and I going to sleep thinking about how I'm going to organize those ideas into something meaningful. Yeah, those words again. Yeah.
There's so much. Thomas, I mean, if I was to tell you that, let me tell you the thing which I am sharing from you, which I find is so useful, and kind of. And then there's a whole layer to this, which is that, I mean, I started teaching in 1996, and I meet teachers now, like all this time later, who still having been through, you know, a teacher training process, which I've had to learn quite a lot, and then have been in school, there's so much to learn. And lots of us have yet to kind of fully explore how memory and learning works. And it's not sort of front and center of a teacher training process for a lot of people, even still. And you might argue that it ought to be, but I'm finding there's a lot of material, a lot of mileage in talking to teachers about these stages. So in your diagrams, you have this fantastic kind of, I don't know what you would call it, and it depends, there are different ways you call it, but that kind of initial encoding of an idea.
Yeah.
And getting children to just, or it could be an adult, to just have an idea and to sort of take some form in your memory. So it has to kind of get in there. And then you link it to stuff you already know, which constitutes some understanding. And this is the bit where I find is just quite a breakthrough for people, is unless that's happened, those two steps, there's no point setting them a quiz like a week later saying, guys, can you see if you remember that thing you did last week? Because there's nothing for them to remember. There's like that initial encoding and connecting has to happen, doesn't it? I mean, that sounds very simple, but I could come up with millions of examples of that, where some children are doing that. So the teacher thinks, hey, this is going nicely.
Right.
A whole bunch of other kids aren't. And they're just in the room going, what's happening? So, I mean, do you have lots of that experience that you're sharing with people?
So again, what's the question?
The experiences, like specific learning instances, like there's a sort of abstraction with the diagrams that you share, but do you have instances where you've seen these things happen, where you're saying to your students, this is how it looks in practice? So
first, I'm thinking two things at the same time. First, where it comes from. And for me, it comes very naturally because this was my, education. I was working when I was doing cognitive science in the lab. I was working in a lab that was actually looking at those memory traces, and encoding and consolidation and retrieval were the words that we were using all the time. So this is how I think about memories. And then it become useful to other people. And this is make me very happy that I can actually share it. And my experience has been mainly, my most direct association is new words in a language, because this is something that I'm obviously busy thinking about. And I was working with language teachers quite a lot. And words, but then, so words are the main example. And you actually can, and I was conscious about me doing that, listening to a word that I've never heard before, and then hearing the same word again. And then the third time, okay, I need to figure out what this word means. So I was actually being able to see this process happening. I was conscious about it. And then you can see in other people, I'm talking about those concepts, retrieval practice, for example, or whatever it is, encoding or reconsolidation. And you can see sometimes people asking you again the same question. And I just said it. Wasn't it clear? And then you figure out, no, it wasn't. You have to, it's the process of people figuring it out. So these instances, I think it just links to what you just said, that you think you teach something, but then that doesn't mean that
like the content that you're thinking about is actually the very material which explains the process which they're engaging in. It's like, wow. So that's really mind-blowing. Like actually encoding the idea of encoding. It's
encoding the idea of encoding. Yeah.
It's like a mirror within a mirror within a mirror.
Yeah.
That's my life in every moment. We always, talk about teachers learning, and then about their students learning, and then how we model good teaching for the teachers to learn. And it's it's.
Does that resonate with you,
metacognition times 3?
Exactly, metacognition cubed.
Yeah.
So what was your gateway, Emma? What was your gateway?
The gateway, the kind of the aha moment was when I was reading the earlier stuff about the know, understand, use, master model. And I was looking at it through the lens of curriculum and what goes into a curriculum. And I was thinking that so often the teaching of the curriculum stops at the understand stage, and there's not space within the curriculum to then do the kind of the use and the master one. And then the more I started to read about it, the more I was thinking, oh my goodness, this has got implications for lesson design, sequence design, for curriculum content, for curriculum organization, sequencing. And so I kind of fell down an Efrat Furst shaped rabbit hole and fell in love with the whole kind of know, understand, use master model, which I think is so unbelievably useful, not just for thinking about how students learn, but also thinking about how we plan the sequences and then leave space for those processes to happen. I don't know whether I've completely got the wrong end of the stick with that, Efrat, or whether that's what you intended it for it to be used. Or
yeah, well, definitely. And I think also to link back to the meta-analysis that was just mentioned before, it's the same idea that we are so in love with explaining and teaching and organizing, which is incredibly important. And nothing can happen without those concepts first and those explanations seconds, and the examples and the modeling and everything. But this stuff, we love it. We are conscious about it. We are aware of it. We enjoy organizing because when things click, it's really, really nice. But the job does not end there. And what I see now most clearly is that we have a lot of biases. And actually, nowadays, I think that those biases that we have are the reason to talk about cognitive science, because we have to be aware, for example, for this exact thing. We love explaining, but then we underestimate both, and I say we, both as teachers and as students, we underestimate because of understandable reasons, that the work doesn't end there. And in order to make something actually meaningful, it has to be useful, because this is how the brain works. Because only when, I think that the real aha moments comes after you use things. Well, you sit in the class and you say, okay, that makes sense. So, but unless you're actually using it in any case, and it can be really dry at the beginning, just an exercise or an example or something like that you do, it's only the first time that you signal your brain, oh, this is something that you need to keep because it might be useful again. So so this is, I think, the link that is missing. And this is, as I said before, it's also the reason that I really like this model that says you have to do at least one thing from each and every step of the way until really embedding it in your daily practice, which is...
I just had a thought that might be completely wrong. You can correct me on this. You said, well, as teachers, we like the first two bits. We like explaining. We like doing this. But then as the student, you feel that sense of accomplishment when you use and master what you've been learning. So is there a misalignment between when you kind of get your notional dopamine hit, you get your dopamine hit as a teacher and, I'm explaining really well, but actually the learner gets their hit further down the line as in, I've learned it, I can use it. Is there a kind of a two-tier?
I think so, but also there is a huge, heel in between, because for the learners to get to the point that they get this dopamine, they have to do something that they don't want to do or that they don't think that they need to do. And this is where the bias comes in. I like to call it sometimes the short-term, long-term paradox, or I know it is also called the stability bias or something like that, that we think that if I had just understood it, then, okay, I'm good to go because it feels good. But so there is a really, really, I don't know, I also always draw it as a hill that you have to climb in order to get to the other side. And it's really the thing that we have to work with a lot. And, many times, probably if I go to a lecture and present this diagram for the first time, so people say, oh, now I get it. So we have to tell the students that they have to practice or whatever it is. And I say, no, you can tell them 100 times, it won't happen. It's your responsibility to actually embed it into your lesson plan, curriculum, whatever it is. So this is something
What I find people then will say is that, doesn't this take time? And I think that people get anxious about that. But I feel like, my experience of this, am I interpreting this wrongly, that even that first stage, the kind of no stage, where you're just encoding, I actually think that's the weakest part of the whole process, because in a class of, say, 30 children, is that the fact that I have said something to you, like, I don't know, I could pick something up like, here's a coin. This coin is made of iron or something. Let's say it is, which they should have heard of. Or this is a circle.
Yeah. And
so you think you've said it into the ether, into the room. The assumption you make is, so you should all know that now. And then let's move on to another thing. And
that you can use it to explain the next thing. Yeah. They're
going, what? So it's that assumption that the encoding is happening kind of as we talk or as we show. But that's so often that's not true. I mean, so for me, that it's never mind the using. It's like, let's get the encoding happening. That's my sense of it. Does that make sense to you?
I really think it's a very important idea. And I see whatever you describe, it's really something that repeats that, okay, I introduce you to new concepts and then I just use them in order to explain something more complex. And it's a real problem there. And I think that the most, the great idea that I love to introduce into this section exactly is Meyer's pre-training principle. And Meyer has a list of a growing list of principles about in his cognitive theory of multimedia learning. And the principle says that if you're going to teach something, it's better if you introduce a new concept in advance and separately. That means that before a lesson starts, you have to, or even at home or as homework from last time, it's advised to actually students or whoever your learners are to learn those concepts as, something that is, you can call it dry or very basic, but it's an important stage that this principle tells us about. So definitely. And when I talk about the no principle, I usually talk about reduce distractions, focus, and then introduce new concepts in advance and separately, which is really important. I think it's a very powerful principle, definitely.
So, I mean, it's that I can think of lots of applications of that, and it's getting people to. Do you think talk is a big factor of this? Because this is one of my feelings. Like, okay, can you assume? So here's my feeling is that apart from the fact that talk, makes public what you're thinking. So in a class situation, we need to check people learning that you can hear it and then engage with it before it's sort of written. But of course, adults and more sophisticated learners might do all of it mentally. But one of the things I like to encourage is teachers or children getting to sort of run through, like, just talk it through for me. So what do you think this is? And what's happened here? So they have to kind of rehearse the idea, even though the information is still there. They have to talk it out. To me, is that a sensible idea, or am I kidding myself just because I can hear it that means it's better?
I think that if someone is using the term, then it's a signal that the term was encoded and maybe even consolidated. It reminded me of this really nice fact from Annie Murphy's poem, The Extended Mind, when she talks about those gestures that comes before students actually understand. So this is something real. I think it's related, because if someone is talking to you and then say, oh, this thing or those, and the concept is not there yet, then this is when you can sense, and I think she really makes a nice point there. This is when you can sense that this is not ripe yet, and you have to wait for it to happen. But if a student uses it in a sentence, then it's there. Yeah. I would.
Just been talking about that this afternoon. I've literally done a whole staff meeting on gestural foreshadowing this afternoon.
This bit was so interesting. Yeah.
It's fascinating because the bit where she says about the fact that it's that mismatch between the gesture and the speech, where children or the learner is most receptive to instruction, and that's the bit that we should be looking out for. So yes, you can listen to whether they're competent and with the words in their mouths, but are they competent with the concept they're holding in their hands at the same time? And if there's that mismatch, that's when you dive in with that either additional instruction or questioning or whatever. But a fellow Annie Murphy Paul fan.
So I think you just build a sequence there where Tom says if they are able to speak about it, then they've bridged the gap. But if they're not there yet, then we might be able to sense this sensitive, teachable moment that we can use. Yeah, definitely.
It's so interesting. One of the things I do in my training was like a question. I don't know. I'm a science teacher, so I'm biased towards science questions. But
me too.
I found this a question that I like to get teachers to ask, which is, why does the sun rise in the east? And I've hit on that one because over the years I found that most people kind of have an idea of that, but they don't always know really well how to explain it. And so there's a difference between sort of knowing and then, so if someone said to you, do you think you know why the sun rises in the east? People will say, yeah, but actually when they actually have to explain it, they go, oh, okay. Yep. And then so I do that question. And when you've got a room full of people doing that, and I get them to do it in a pair, so everyone's doing it, and immediately you get this room full of people kind of offloading their memory into these sort of, their hand is, sometimes people use a bottle on the table, or their hand is the earth, and they're starting to go, which way does it go? And they're externalizing, they're creating a sort of visual space for them to think about the whole scenario with their hands. And I love watching that because they're kind of mentally rehearsing, and that is so brilliant. You imagine if they had to do it with their hands tied behind their back.
Tom, that is the task that I use in my training. I've got a list of things to explain. I say, right, explain it to your colleague, but you have to have your hand behind your back. And what it looks like is a nature documentary about seals, because everybody then starts going backwards and forwards with their hands behind their back.
That's great, isn't it?
So actually you're touching here, I think, because I'm now busy with thinking about and mapping illusions, because I really got to the conclusion that this is what stops us from doing the right things sometimes. And this is the illusion of understanding. We have that we experience a lot. And until we tried to use this information to do something that is useful, that gets, a feedback from our environment, or which is the people that we talk to, we didn't really understand it. So it actually means that we have to, and back to your question, Emma, about how to find space in every program, in order, we have to test everything. We have to make sure that things are really meaningful only by trying them out. Otherwise, it all connects back to those things, I think.
I think there are different ways. I mean, I've had people, people react to ideas differently. It depends on their subject context. And, I wrote a blog about needed to get people to explain more in lessons. And some math teachers sort of took umbrage about that, because they felt like, in maths, you can show your understanding through just repeated practice and, pen and paper, and you don't have to talk it out. I can show I understand maths without having to do a big whole class presentation, because you can. And that's true. But it's a kind of, so in other words, you can show your understanding in multiple ways. And I think it's important to put a subject context around that, because they obviously have to be broad-minded about this stuff. But there are some things there where, what I love when cognitive science provides a kind of a diagnostic, and for me, one of the main diagnostics is this whole thing of the sum and the all. The hardest thing about teaching is teaching everybody.
Right.
It's hard to get feedback in real time from everyone as they're processing, and even to structure things so they can all participate and everything. It's actually quite demanding. So that illusion of understanding is, that the classic kind of, has everyone got that? Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing. Yeah. I always thinking about it as the nodding effect.
The nodding.
Sorry. That it's enough to have two nodding heads in the classroom for you to feel good and think that you can go on. Yeah.
Oh, isn't it funny? Some teachers are hilariously grateful that somebody knows something. They go, "Oh yes, Stephen, thank you," and Stephen can go on. And everyone else is going, "What's he on about?"
Yeah.
I'll ask you about a couple of other ideas, though, concepts, because there's a couple of gems. I mean, we only have so much time, but a couple of things I've picked up from you. Well, one of them is prediction, and the role that plays in supporting learning. So can you say a bit about that? So why is prediction, or getting students to predict things, so useful?
Well, again, because I think it's something very basic that we do all the time naturally. We predict that things will happen, and then we either confirm or not. So it's, the predictive brain, and a lot have been said about that. It's a very natural way. And there is a lot of very interesting research on prediction. And I felt that the research was not, I still feel that way, is not communicated to teachers as well as a lot of other subjects, like retrieval practice, for example. And there are a lot of very interesting ideas there that most of us can understand because we have the prior knowledge and the background.
So is it right that this is where I got a little bit confused with it, because at one point I was thinking that it's almost more helpful if you're wrong in your prediction than if you're right, because then you sort of go, oh, why am I wrong? And then it gets you involved. But if you're right, you just sort of can kind of lazily just go, yeah, I know it. And so is that, but then obviously being right is also an advantage. So how does that work? Is that too like?
So there is research about it actually, and there are two ways to go. And if your prediction is confirmed, then you learn better. Okay, we learn better things that we already know. So you learn quicker and you understand better because it's automatically linked to your schema, if you will. So this is, and I think there are even evidence for the fact that this goes in different neural pathways. So there is some research into that. So if you understand, it's one pathway, and it's the network that takes care of those ideas that we already know to strengthen them. But then if it's new, then it's another it's another mode of alertness. Okay, something is not working the way I predicted. It means that I need to learn. So it's the basic trigger for learning, and this is when we are actually very alert because something is not working. It's like, think about an animal that goes through a pathway to find water, and then it's they can't go. I don't know, there is a bear or some kind of danger, so they have to relearn the pathway to save their lives. So it's the same, just in the classroom. Yeah.
Wow.
I like it. We have to reframe our maths questions, Emma, as like rework the path to save your life.
Yeah, but it is right. It is powerful, and this is what we do. Everything that we learn, every time that we learn something new, we change something. So in a sense, is those same ideas of constructivist learning, of assimilation, and I forgot the other one. I talked about him so much in Hebrew that I forgot the English.
I think of the translation.
I remember, yeah.
Is it about that kind of, is the best point to be at then kind of on the cusp of understanding, as in, so it could go one way, it could go the other way. So you're kind of just on that precipice of, I might need to do some new learning, or this might just be something I understand. Is that the sweet spot then?
Yeah.
Kind of neural pathway creation.
So it is both. You just mentioned the neural pathway, but when you're talking, I was imagining a classroom scenario, and if I'm someone who taught that content before, I sometimes know where these points are, and then I can celebrate them in a way by introducing a question just there, deciding, I have a classroom, I have a limited number of questions that I can use through a lesson because it's time consuming and whatever. And then these are the spots when I know that I need to choose to use the question there in order to make the most of this learning moment. So, yeah,
I think a natural, this is probably instinctive to a storyteller. Like a lot of primary school teachers they get good at storytelling because they do it a lot. And it's very common as a science teacher to I love it when you watch a primary teacher and they always do this. So everybody, what do we think is going to happen next? And it's that kind of predicting what's going to happen next is a very natural thing to do as a storyteller, isn't it? I mean, but you might not be thinking why. It just feels instinctive to ask.
Well, storytelling is something that a lot of people learn how to do well. But, as a science teacher, for example, it's the most, the easiest example. You are about to just demonstrate something. right? Something is going to happen and you know that it's going to be surprising, okay? A lot of examples, something falls or something burns and whatever. So if you just stop just before this surprising moment and you ask those learners to predict, so the entire experience, even if it's just a video, is amplified because everybody has to predict. And if I know that there's some misconception and that students are likely to predict in a wrong way, then I use the question in the best way. So not ask before and don't ask after, but ask just in this moment before the surprising moment is about to happen. So definitely science is the easiest, I think.
Is it about thinking about your subject or your lesson or your sequence as well, I suppose, like a story, like a narrative then, and thinking about the cliffhanger moment and go, right, identify the cliffhanger moment, this is where we predict.
Yes, just like good storytellers, they use all those ways to just introduce it in a suspenseful way, and it's the same. And
then bang, we have to wait until tomorrow to find out.
So you won't see the next bit of the video before you answer this question. And then say, oh, but then it's exciting.
That's funny because there are some video programs which, and I won't name them because that would be mean, but there were some maths video programs where the students are, it just says press pause and then do the sum, and then the next second it tells the answer. But if you're 15 and you're a bit, you just carry on watching because you just think, the answer.
Even if you're older than 15, you carry on watching.
Exactly, you cheat yourself, don't you? Let me ask you about the other thing. The other thing I was going to say was just, I don't know, until you explained this, I'd never heard of it and never thought about it, was this idea of reconsolidation. And to me, this is just absolutely mind-blowing, really, which is that, and the way I've explained this in some of my training, so you tell me if you think this sounds sensible, is that to get people to imagine, I say, like, Matt, what did you do last Saturday? What did you do? Where did you wake up? Who else was there? Was it a surprise? That's my joke.
A bit brave of a Saturday morning to ask people.
What did you have for breakfast? When did you go out? And people are sort of thinking, oh God, I don't know. I mean, it was just a regular Saturday. But then I say, so imagine you were there with your partner. They would, between you could have pieced together the true story of kind of where you were. And now you've remembered that Saturday. The act of remembering it is part of the memory of the Saturday. So when that reconsolidates back into your memory of Saturday, this stuff you've done now is now part of that. So, but if you've misremembered, and if you've now remembered that you had the tea instead of coffee or whatever now, and that's not corrected, that goes back into your memory. So there's a kind of danger then of like misremembering and not correcting it, isn't it? So that's a huge pitfall. How do we deal with that as teachers?
Well, first I have to say that this idea was the first one. Well, the lab that I was working in my PhD was researching this idea in the level of the neurons and the behaving animals. So they actually proved this idea that before people thought that if you learn something, then the connections are made and then they're encoded and consolidated and they're there for long-term memory. Okay. But then some experiments didn't work the way people expected. And when they looked at more carefully, they found out that actually when we use or retrieve the information, the actual trace, and we know it in a biological way, the actual trace becomes malleable, and in a way it's in a stage that it waits for new directions. So if it's and it's related to what we talked before about prediction. So if it's confirmed, then it's one pathway, but if it's an opportunity to change something. Okay. And so this was, the field of research that I was immersed in. And this is when I first learned about the testing effect. Okay. The testing effect is the idea that when you retrieve something, you actually strengthens the memory and it fits perfectly. And this is the first time when I thought, okay, here is the link between neuroscience and education. So this is the idea, and it happens all the time. We reconsolidating things every time we're doing retrieval practice. Okay, so this is the link. This is why the strength, people talk about those pathway strengthening, because it's true. Every time we retrieve something, it's ready for a change. And if we learn something new that is correct, then it's going one way. But if we learn something new that is incorrect, then we are messing with the trace. In a good way or in a bad way. So this is how it works. So for me, it's this is maybe the first thing that I wanted to draw to show this idea. I think it goes back to everything that we talked about today, right? From encoding to and especially retrieval and prediction and reconciliation. So I think it's a very basic idea. Sometimes we take it for granted, but this is how it happens.
Do you know what I'm thinking about, Tom? And again, I don't know if I've got the wrong idea. Imagine that initial initial encoding as an ice cube. And then when we retrieve it, it goes to water, and it could go back to the right shape of an ice cube, but it could be frozen in the shape of something else.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of malleable state in the middle where it's watery, where it could go back and be solid ice again, or it could be shaped something, or just disappear entirely like vapor.
So we don't know about that, but yes, definitely. So this is the idea that whenever it's active, whenever we use something, and this is why these ideas are so powerful about retrieval practice and using the ideas, and why using is so important for understanding and for making meaning, because this is where it's our opportunity to play with it. And it goes to research takes it to curing phobias and anxiety and all those kinds of things, or post-traumatic memories. Okay, this is how people are thinking about treating them and succeeding in many. It's very basic, and
if it can go through something and make it a positive experience, you relearn that it's actually a positive thing rather than a different thing. And again, I feel like I feel like I start record on this, but that process needs to be happening for everyone in the room. So when you're getting students to retrieve a memory, that making meaning for them, they've got to be able to sort of almost like hearing themselves think or rehearsing, bringing it out, so that they can create that malleability. Otherwise, you end up with fixed learning. But doesn't it lead to this thing? So there's a fantastic part of Graham Nuttall's Hidden Lives of Learners, where he talks about the children round the table, sort of unheard by the teacher at the time, but captured on the microphones on the table, where they kind of say something to each other like, "Well, my dad says blah, blah, blah," some total nonsense. And that's part of the learning. That's part of their day at school, that Michael's dad says, and that's stuck in their head, and that becomes their fact, which might be utterly spurious. That explains that as well, doesn't it? It's so interesting.
Yeah. It's related, not that I often think about it, but sometimes you wonder why some students understand better. And then I think about it. If they have a habit of retrieving things and explaining things to themselves, implicitly, but if they have this habit, and this is the way they think, then they have more opportunities of retrieval and reconciliation. So they learn better, but this is only because of their habits of thinking. So when people talk about habits of thinking, this is what I think about. And sometimes I see those examples in classrooms. When you ask someone to rehearse, different people do different things, and those different things actually implicate the way or how well or the quality of the learning. And this is exactly these points.
That's so interesting. Well, I'm getting the signal from our wonderful producer that we're kind of coming towards the end, so I'm going to have to wrap it up soon. I could just talk to you forever about this. I mean, it's like a sort of super nerd fest. We're talking to Sarah Cottingham soon, so we're going to carry on.
Okay, so you'll do,
yeah, I mean, this is for me. This is just like, I love it. But can I ask you a couple of questions just for people picking up on you? So we've already mentioned your Teaching with Learning in Mind blog, which is brilliant. Are you coming to the UK anytime? Are you doing any research ed events or anything like that?
I am doing a research ed in Warrington in April, but I don't think I will come. I don't know yet, but I think it will be remotely. And I definitely have to start thinking about it. Yeah, I don't have plans, but I need to make some plans.
Well, I tell you, if you come to Research Ed in September in London, you'll have a massive audience, and I'll be in the front row.
Might have to book the O2.
Yeah.
I actually thought that after, following from very remotely, but very closely on Twitter and last year's, I think that it might be a good idea. I was really jealous, and I think I should think about it seriously.
But if you can make the flight, make the journey. Anyway, look, honestly, I wanted to say a huge thank you. We're going to have to stop there, but it's just such a joy talking to you. You're so knowledgeable, and I love the way you are like embodiment of this bridge between research and practice, and you're so you just got such a subtle understanding of that. It's brilliant, and it's so helpful to so many of us. Everyone raves about you, kind of. It's just like, oh my god, have you read the latest thing? So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real honor.
Oh,
so thank you so much. It's been a privilege, and I didn't even made all the connections that I wanted to do with this thing that I've read about your work, which I think is amazing. But yes, thank you so much for having me. And I hope you got everything, because I saw that our line wasn't perfect. So apologies for that. And I hope we have more opportunities.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk again. So thank you so much. And thanks to everyone listening. I just want to say big thanks on behalf of me and Emma. We're pleased that this episode and the one before, we now have over 100,000 listens to Mind the Gap since we started. So we're blown away with that. So thank you so much for listening, and keeping us going. We love doing this. So that's been Efrat Furst, a wonderful guest on Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe with me and Emma, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.